you so much for joining me today. This is part of our series where we showcase a woman somewhere in the world doing something cool and interesting and making this world a better place. Some people are coaches because we are Coacharia and you happen to be a coach, but some aren't. So the whole point is just to kind of figure out who you are, how you got to where you are, and learn something interesting about you and from you.
Good. I hope we can.
I think we will. So your background is super interesting, and it's around neuroscience, and I'll let you talk about kind of your education and all your amazing accolades. But for me, what's interesting actually is working with Coacharia for the past 2 years. A lot of people that I encounter kind of get into coaching much later, and they figure out that that's, a passion of theirs through maybe a series of things that they didn't want to do before. And you've had a whole career dedicated to your area. It sounds like you're someone who figured out what she wants to do and just went for it.
So actually, on the contrary, in fact, dramatically on the contrary, I had a massive life-changing experience at the age of 40 and completely and profoundly changed my whole world, my career, my physical being, my emotional and mental being. So I was actually a very late developer, in fact.
So I'm very, very wrong. I went by the experience on your LinkedIn profile, so you'll make mistakes.
That's my secret. I keep it secret, but I'll tell you about it. So that's okay.
Okay. So what happened? Tell us your journey.
So I had a very different life in the first sort of 20 years of my adult life until the age of 40. Your kind of classic midlife crisis, I guess, except it wasn't just a developmental crisis. It was more of a life event. Life kind of happened at me and made me take a good and deep look at myself, my world, and how I was inhabiting it. And at the time, obviously, I was experiencing but looking back, I can see kind of from a high level perspective how I profoundly shift my perspective. And coaching actually had a lot to do with it, because I had a catalyst for change, which was discovering that my son was profoundly brain damaged. He has special needs. He was 5 years old at the time, and we thought he was absolutely 100% fine, and then discovered that he was never going to have a normal life. So it kind of really made me relook at the world. And I, at the same time, started training to be a coach and discovered this world. I remember the trainer saying to me at the end of the program, it was like you discovered this house that you'd always owned and walked through every room, but you'd never realized that you owned it before. And it was just something that really resonated for me. And so I very much credit coaching as being part of my transformation, coming out of that catalyst of discovering my son was damaged.
So it makes sense, the neuroscience bit now. So thank you for sharing that. How did you decide that you wanted to kind of marry these two disciplines, the neuroscience and the coaching?
So I'm not so sure how much of my kind of crazy life that has happened since I'm now 54. So it's kind of for the last 14 years has been deliberate. And it's almost, in some ways, I just started to live more within my truth, more within my purpose. And I almost attracted opportunities that came to me. So although I've always been very interested in learning in the brain, because I actually not terribly intelligent and kind of really did badly at school and had been introduced to some learning techniques sort of post school that I started to learn how to understand how to use my brain. I never really understood before how to use it. So I had an interest in neuroscience and the brain. But then I was very, very lucky to be exposed to David Rock's world, where he started the Neuroleadership Institute. And I happened to discover an ability to train, discover an ability to coach, and at the same time was kind of there present, and I guess maybe David noticed and gave me opportunities And I just was there as he launched that institute and was part of kind of the building up of it in terms of assisting David, assisting the neuroscientists as they developed the programs with Middlesex University. So I can't really say it was deliberate, but there was that background fascination there already. Yeah.
So with that background and, you know, the science and the art, I suppose, that is in coaching, how do you juggle that? Because I imagine that there's, you know, the scientist bit is on one shoulder and the, you know, coach who's just listening on the other.
So I think I see the neuroscience, obviously when we're coaching somebody, we're not teaching them or telling them. So I love using the neuroscience to train coaches. I think that's the most direct connection. And also to explain coaching and why coaching works, to do talks on coaching and how effective it is and why it's so effective. So the science is more of a background. I guess in terms of understanding people's functioning, my background is also in clinical psychology, in trauma work, in grief counseling, addiction, etc. Those have always been interests of mine. And so I think it's marrying all of those in terms of understanding how to get the best out of people, how people function, how people limit themselves from a neurological perspective, and also the possibility that they have for change. And then I also integrate a lot of the spirituality as well into the neuroscience. So I have a great fascination with kind of the brain, the spirit, the heart, how people do things, kind of integrating all of those aspects.
I can see that you're starting to smile as you're saying all those things, which shows that you're excited and passionate about it. What's like the coolest thing that you've learned by in those disciplines? What's like the most surprising thing that's...
I think what's been really surprising, because it's also been very much part of my later kind of journey. I'm definitely a late developer, but has been the connection to spirituality and the very strong and real connection that the neuroscience kind of now is just giving maybe a language or an academic explanation for what the great sages and gurus and thinkers of the ages have really been saying all along. That's been fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of times I think about magic and how we define magic in different eras, and how as we learn more things, magic turns out that is just something we didn't understand.
Yes.
I wonder, you know, with what we're learning about the brain, I wonder what we're going to realize is not actually magic. Or maybe it is magic because it is so cool and it actually happens.
And I think also often I get the comment from people that I'm teaching around the brain. I often get the comments, you're putting a language to something I intuitively knew anyway. So it's not like it's something brand new and people have never, yes, the language maybe is brand new, but it's kind of sinks and it lands with people because it kind of suddenly things make sense. If you can, that's the magic for me.
I totally get that. I've had that journey as I learn about coaching. Before I joined Coacharia, my background is in marketing and in being a scrappy business builder, not a coach. And as I learned I put names to different concepts that we learn as coaches, that's what's been really cool for me. It's like, oh yeah, so when I did this with my team 10 years ago, that's what I was actually trying to do. And it's just, it's early morning, so I'm not finding all the words right now for me. But you know what I mean.
Well, maybe I'll tell you what I used to do, but we'll see.
Why not? Tell me.
Okay, so I must tell you that. I actually, until the age of 40, I was actually a beautician. I painted people's nails and did massages, and that's what I'd done for the previous 20 years. So it was not only just from a career perspective, but I profoundly changed my life from an academic perspective as well, but also in terms of physical health, physical well-being. I never used to do any exercise whatsoever, and now I'm an avid cyclist and athlete, and yeah, so it was a profound change on many levels. And I do
And mountain climber.
That, and yeah, a few other things. So, but I credit coaching because that's why I believe in it so much, and that's why I'm so passionate about my coaching and my clients, because I walk the walk, and I see what it did for me, and I discovered changes that I didn't think were possible in myself. And I see every time a client sits in front of me, I just know in the deepest of my heart what is possible, you know, for people to achieve if they want to, and that it brings me great joy and great satisfaction from my work.
Do you often encounter people who don't want to change?
No, I don't think. I mean, it's almost the nature of, you know, how I show up is that my whole world is about helping people understand what is possible for them. I'm not really a coach that's forced into any kind of coach, because I'm in private practice, so I can, you know, I put myself out there as somebody who's a part of a transformation world. So I'm not really brought in as a strategic performance coach in any circumstances. I'm usually actually brought in when people really need to understand that their subconscious and unconscious processing, when people, a terrible word for it would be a remedial coach, I guess, in some sense, but it's when people really have lost their way and need to refine it, that because I know, because I've walked that path. That's why I think I'm good at coaching it.
So I get that part, but I think where I struggle with coaching sometimes is, you know, you do have people who come to that self-awareness by force or by will, that they need some sort of intervention to get to where they need to get to. But what about those people, you know, before they get to self-awareness? Sometimes I would say that that's the ones who need it the most. What do you say to them?
Well, I think that's why it's important to actually, for people to experience coaching, not always as a performance management, goal-orientated process, but as a process of self-discovery. And in my experience, when you get into a person's soul with them and help them shine lights in areas and wisdom around themselves and how they function and how they either sabotage themselves or what is possible. When we do that, I've never found people resistant to it. Perhaps people are not always ready to take the next actions, but that self-awareness is, in my experience, people experience it as a great gift. Even those that are mostly lacking in self-awareness, usually it's fear anyway, that's not allowing them to go there. Occasionally there are people that are not ready for coaching or don't want to, and I'm absolutely say that coaching only occurs when it needs to occur, and if it doesn't, if the person's not ready, that's okay.
You brought up fear, and what's interesting is this is, I think, my 5th or 6th Wonder Woman interview, and fear seems to be a common thread, and it's coming up in different ways. And I'm wondering, is procrastination also an expression of fear? Because a lot of people end up, you know, I've talked to them and they're like, well, I've been thinking about this for blah, blah, blah. And then something happens and they finally do it. But a lot of times it's like there's something in the back of their mind already pushing them or pulling them towards whatever is next. But they're finding reasons of why not to do it until that catalyst event occurs. Maybe procrastination is the wrong word. I don't know. But talk to me about that.
No, so what is fear? You know, fear basically is a future-oriented narrative that is dominant in the brain. It's not based in any kind of reality. It's only based in an illusion of, or a perception of what reality will become. And so for me, that fear, I agree with you, fear definitely can cause procrastination, but it's more uncertainty creates that procrastination. And what I believe our work is to do is to shift that narrative, to help them discover the narrative first and see how that narrative is creating their current reality, And then how do we help them to process in a different way that creates a constructive, present-centered narrative where you're able to take action in the moments as opposed to becoming immobilized by the uncertainty of what possibly could be ahead, if that makes sense. So for me, it's all about,
it does, yeah.
Even what we're going through right now in the world, you know, it is what it is, but it's the narrative about what is that is creating our distress and our anxiety and our worries.
So how do you shift that? What do you, when you work with a client, what are the steps you take to get to that place where you're not focusing on the scary possibilities?
Well, I mean, I guess we could do a 3-hour chat around this, but just maybe at a high level to answer that. It's about helping people to firstly recognize the narrative, because many of us are controlled by that story in our head, you know, and it could be the story of self-doubt, or the story of limiting beliefs or whatever, or the story about what is possible or impossible, but always that narrative is what limits us. And where we find our place of strength and our place of centeredness and our place of power is when we come into the present moment and we let go of that and we tap into our inner self, our inner power, our inner truth. I know this sounds all kind of high level, but even that kind of language for me helps center people and to allow them to look with wisdom rather than with self-doubt or conditioned thinking. Take them out of the conditioning and get them into just the being of their present moments.
As Kung Fu Panda said very wisely, yesterday is history, tomorrow's a mystery, but today is a gift. It's why they call it the present.
Yeah, I love that.
So much we can learn from everything around us. So man, like you, I did not realize the huge shift that you've made. I mean, you say that you're a catalyst for change, and like you said too, like you've gone through it, you've lived it, so it's possible for anyone to do it. And it's kind of getting a bit excited because I'm 39 and I'm pretty happy with what I've done with my life. I'm a big believer in you are what you eat. I mean, every experience you've had makes you who you are. I mean, I've had some crappy ones and some amazing ones. You know what? They were there for a reason. I'm good. But yeah, I do wonder kind of what's next and what amazing thing is going to happen. Maybe it's going to be around the Wonder Woman Wednesdays. I'll start a movement of showcasing wonderful women like yourself. But for someone, yeah, like me, who I want to figure out what's next. I'm not unhappy. I'm pretty happy. How do you explore that? What advice do you give to people to figure that out?
So if I can just backtrack a little, I mean, we obviously understand from kind of the developmental phases of our lives is that, you know, we go through that kind of identity formation, that identity crisis throughout our adolescence. But unfortunately, because society, culturally, education system, conditioned expectations, male or female, successful or not successful, whatever, because of all this conditioning, very rarely do people actually emerge from that identity formation phase of their lives with their true identity intact. Rather, it's conditioned by external expectations. And I see, in fact, I think I draw this to myself and it's usually women at about 37, 38, 39. The men are often at about 40, 41, 42. There's often a slight gap, but sometimes overlap, where there's a revisitation of that identity crisis. And it's an opportunity to say, okay, now that I'm able to actually let go of what are these external societal expectations through maturity, through wisdom, through learning, life experiences or whatever, now what is my truth and what is true for me? And for me, that is just beautiful and profound work to do. I love doing it with young people to discover it earlier and not have to go through kind of the trauma chaos that I had to in order to find it. But it's then about helping people to tap into what are their values, what is it they want from their lives, what is possible, and also, and this is so borne out by all my research into neuroplasticity, is that what is possible is actually beyond our wildest dreams. What we're actually capable of in terms of how we can shift our personalities, our temperament, our brain, the functioning of our mind is profound. But here's the deal: it takes effort, and it takes commitment, and it takes courage, and it takes self-discipline, and it's a choice. But helping people just become aware that they have that choice, for me, that is often the most liberating thing, that suddenly I don't have to be who it is that I've thought I've had to be my entire life. Anything is possible. And I'm not talking about winning the lottery.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of maybe a client you've worked or a case study you've heard about of that kind of like profound shift, just to illustrate what is possible?
Oh, I've got hundreds of case studies, because this is an area where I seem to attract my my clients. And I think often it's, whether it's at a career perspective. I mean, I had one wonderful client who was an accountant, and because that was what she was told that she always had to be. And when we started to discover what is it that she's passionate about, what gets her up in the morning, what excites her, it was about children and teaching. And she actually ended up opening a Montessori nursery school, going from being a CA to a Montessori school owner is quite a profound thing. So whether it's as practical as a career change, but it's mostly often influential, where people let go of that conditioned narrative and almost free themselves to live, whether it's a more healthy physical life, whether it's a shifting out of destructive relationships, be those historical relationships or current relationships. Those are the profound changes that I think are really exciting.
So that sounds great, but like you mentioned earlier, culture, etc., it has an impact on this, right? So I was just speaking to someone in India yesterday, and they're on lockdown completely. And in India, a lot of people who can afford it have domestic help. So it's not uncommon to have a cook and a cleaner. So kids are used to having that. And now that that's not happening, kids are having to learn that, oh, it's not just, the auntie that comes over and cleans and it's always a woman. I have to now help mom and dad in this particular case, which is great. But, in that culture, just based on my knowledge, is the female-male roles are much more set in stone than maybe in other cultures. So, and another example I can think of, there's a woman that in Chicago that I met who wanted to be a teacher, ended up starting in business and wanted to shift to being a teacher, but didn't for a very long time because of the kind of reverse stigma that, oh yes, women are only, they should be teachers because they're good with kids, blah, blah. She's like, well, no, I'm not going to conform to the stereotype. And she didn't live her passion because of that. So I don't know, just it seems like something really, really hard in certain cultures. I'm not sure there's a question.
So, maybe, I don't know, for example, in a lot of Western cultures, maybe there's a little bit more freedom to discover who you are and show up like that. So I'm very privileged that a massive amount of my work has been in India. And in fact, I've traveled there many times every year. And in fact, most of my Indian friends say that they think I was Indian in a previous life. So when I step off the plane into Mumbai airport, I feel like I've come home. It's quite interesting. And so I work a lot with Indian clients, and yes, there can be that very rigorous stereotypical gender differentiation in terms of expectations of success. It has to be very strong academic, engineering, the maths, the sciences, kind of that defines success. So a lot of my work is helping people take a step back from what are the external expectations and really look at who am I and what am I passionate about, and helping people, you mentioned fear earlier, find the courage to be able to find a way to manifest a more functional life. So it's not stepping away from your culture. It's not about rejecting your society or a belief system. It's not about making it, but it's about how do I integrate more of my truth into how it is that I'm showing up in the world. For me, it's not about being a maverick. It's not about being a rebel. It's just about being more in line with your own what you were born to be, but within an external context, because that external context is important.
Yeah. I think what's also interesting that's happening around the world right now is the whole idea of gender fluidity and being non-gender binary. I find that actually really fascinating because it kind of goes to what we're talking about right now. People just realizing that it's a spectrum, and with that, I feel like the external world barriers, well, hopefully will become a little less scary, but you know, in some places the opposite. But it's an interesting phenomenon, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's gender bias is just, or gender orientation is just one kind of aspect of it. But if we think of ourselves as human beings, and I think when we're coaching a whole human being, and all of us have masculine and feminine. We're not all female or all male. And how do we engage as females with our masculine side? How do we, as males, integrate the feminine part of ourselves? And it's that holistic kind of perspective of being that I really think is so important for a person to be able to live their truth. It's about actually embodying all of those parts of our human selves. You know, we have good and we have bad. We have hate and we have love. We have black and white and smart and stupid. We have all of these aspects of ourselves, but how do we integrate it to become the best version of ourselves? Whereas, you know, I mean, I love the Jung's work and kind of Robert Bly's book. You know, he talks about the black bag, where we stuff all those negative parts of ourselves and we spend the rest of our lives dragging this bag along behind us. And as long as we're dragging this bag, all it's doing is not allowing us to live in the fullness of our humanness. I do believe that human beings are innately magnificent. I don't believe that having hate or having jealousy makes us bad people. It's about, but once we integrate it, we can manage those parts of ourselves. When we're dragging them along behind us, we're not managing them.
So you're saying drop the bag?
No, I'm saying I'm saying integrate the bag, own it, largely part of yourself so that you
wear the bag.
Yeah, no, integrate it. Then you can choose to show up in the best version of yourself. But as long as it's there as a handbrake, we're never going to be able to. I don't know if this makes sense.
It does. And like what's coming up for me is kind of self-judgment. So I think I'm pretty self-aware. I always have been. And through the coaching exposure, I've become even more self-aware. So that's been amazing. But I'm also quite self-critical. And I try not to be judgmental of myself, but I definitely am. And what's been interesting is I catch myself when I judge others, I catch myself much more. And I go, okay, Magda, like, stop. Like, you don't want to be looked at that way. Unconditional positive regard, Magda. And I'm better at that. But towards myself, it's really, really hard.
Yeah. And that is for me a massive part of our of transformation of self-worth, is that we almost, that unconditional positive regard that you talk about, we have to show that within first before we can heal from the pain of not being shown unconditional positive regard by our culture or our families or whatever. So we first have to share it with ourselves. And I think that's why coaching is so beautiful, because we help shine a light on that beautiful, gentle part of ourselves that is in pain and that needs healing. It doesn't need to be corrected or made better or do things differently. It needs to be healed. And that's when people can show up in their true spirit. And Magda, I don't know, I mean, I'm you know, you say you were always quite self-aware. I wasn't. I had no confidence. I had very little self-awareness. I had no my self-esteem. And even to this day, sometimes I wrestle with it, but I believe because I wrestled with it so much, it's made me work at all of these things. And I think that gives me, it gives me an understanding of when other people are wrestling. I kind of have been to those bleak and darkest places, and I have built this world to help me to become an anchor that I don't ever go back there again, if that makes sense. And for me, all the coaching techniques, the way of being as a coach, has all facilitated that anchoring that enables me to live the best version of myself, but it's not easy.
I can totally relate to that. So, you know, for me, I've been blessed with a really amazing family. I grew up in communist Poland, but I think because I've always been stubborn and hard-headed, and my family always encouraged me to do whatever. So my confidence has been high as a kid, and up until I actually moved to Australia in my mid-20s, I didn't understand sometimes why people were so mistrusting, or what happened to them that they acted the way that they did, because I hadn't had that. And then my heart was broken very, very badly. And oh gosh, what's a nice word I can use without putting this guy under the bus? Anyway, there was somebody who was not who messed me up and messed up my trust big time. And that kind of led me, it was a spiral, because once you go through the one thing, you trust less and less. And I ended up in an abusive relationship. And for me, my confidence went from, I thought I was pretty healthy mentally and emotionally. I went completely to zero. I had zero self-worth. I had zero self-esteem. It's taken me a decade to, especially the past couple of years, to get back up to kind of that self-awareness, and not complete self-worth yet, but, you know, getting there. But that makes me wonder, you know, do we have to go through those shitty bottoms to be able to have that self-love and self-awareness, or is it possible to not have to go through the crappy times and still be a confident, happy person?
Well, I mean, you can talk about confidence and aspects, and there's definitely a genetic, you know, there's that whole nature-nurture debate, and we are born with the propensity towards extroversion or introversion, or confidence, or, you know, we're born with those traits. But definitely our environment, and neuroplasticity bears this out, our environment determines to what extent. But if we go even deeper than things like confidence or self-esteem, whether we like it or not, we're going to go through those shitty things. It's going to happen. Life is like that. We have tough experiences. With all the will in the world, life is not going to be smooth. And for me, the difficult experiences, the tough times, the hard times, are the opportunity to learn and grow. And I think we're going through that now. Now, I don't want to sound all rah-rah with what we're going through in the world, because I think it's tragic. I think it's traumatic. I think people are grief-stricken. I think people are bewildered. We cannot underestimate the impact that this is having on people's psyche, on their long-term well-being, from a health point of view, never mind economic and everything else. I think it is incredibly traumatic. And I think we need to acknowledge that, acknowledge the trauma, acknowledge the impact, not getting to that productivity porn space where we become super beings, changing the world. I'm not saying that's not okay, but I think we also need to acknowledge the harshness, the sadness, the loss, the uncertainty. And I think when we do that, then we can work with it. So we can be in this difficult time and come out the best version of ourselves, rather than just reacting and come out the worst version of ourselves, because it is what it is. So how do we be present with that to help make us grow? Without wanting to sound all motivational, I just think we're just not present enough with the horribleness of what is actually occurring, which is not a depressing place to be. It's acknowledging that difficulty, and then how is it that I can grow in wisdom and courage and valor and confidence, self-awareness through this.
So what is, I guess, a concrete step that someone can do during this? Because, you know, for me, my life hasn't changed too much because of the lockdown. Thank goodness, because I already worked from home. I already spend a lot of time on Zoom calls like this one. So I haven't felt the impact as much. Where I felt the impact is just reading too much. My favorite genre of books and TV is true crime. I love a good rabbit hole.
I think
Give me
your
a rabbit
video's
hole and I will go
frozen
down
for
it.
me,
Uh-oh.
Magda. I'm not sure.
Hi, we're back.
Okay.
Yeah. So I love a good
there.
rabbit hole. And what's not good with the current situation is that I can read an article and then I can read a subsequent article and then I can read some background on it and then I can look up some stats and then just it can be freaking depressing. And yeah, how do we avoid that? And how can we instead, like you said, use this for growth, whatever that means? What's a concrete thing we can do?
Well, I think because really the trauma or the attack that we're experiencing, whether we can look at it as financial or disease or whatever aspect, but it truly is uncertainty. So how do we create as much certainty for ourselves? And by the way, this is not exposing yourself to every social media broadcast and every CNN or Sky News. It's actually about creating certainty with what you can be certain about. So I definitely recommend creating structure and routine. We're in serious lockdown here, like in India. We're not even allowed out to go walking. But how do we create a waking time? No, we're not even allowed to go out of our houses, only to get groceries if we absolutely have to. So we're not allowed to exercise, no walking around even our closed-in complexes. We really are locked down. But what people aren't doing is creating structure. There's no wake-up time and there's no sleeping time. So I really believe we need to have exercise time daily. We need to have meditation time. Meditation has never been more important. And people say, how can I meditate in this crisis? Well, there's never been better time to learn because the only thing we are in control of is our mind. So we have to learn to control our mind. But also getting dressed and, not hanging around in your pajamas all day. So creating structures and routines and rituals, which is creating certainty for ourselves. And then again, and I think we might have frozen. Can you hear me, Magda?
Oh, no, I can still hear you. Just I think both our internet is going up and down. I can still hear
recording.
You. Yeah. Uh-oh, can you not hear me? I can still hear you. Hello. Hello, hello. Hello. Oh no.
Okay,
hello.
We're back.
You're back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. We'll wrap things up. Can you repeat that now is a good time to learn meditation? You were talking about that.
Yeah, so because I was saying the only thing we are in control of is the ability to control our own minds, and never in my lifetime has it been more important, but to be able to manage myself, manage my emotional state. So creating structures and routines, I think, is really important because we kind of in a bit of that. I mean, I see us as going through a bit of a grief cycle, moving in those cycles of depression and anger and bargaining and denial. And what we're needing to do is ground ourselves, and we can do that with structure and routines. Self-nurturing as well, and other nurturing. There's no better way to feel better about yourself and to care for someone else, but also about being compassionate with self, not, that driven, I've got to now succeed and I've got to now develop my online business. And that can be very harsh and it can be very unkind. So it's certainly not about not being motivated and not being productive, but do it in a compassionate way to self and to others. Obviously looking after things like nutrition, like sleep, like your physical well-being to whatever extent, and your spiritual well-being. So it's creating as much centeredness and groundedness within the chaos of the unknown, which is what we really is what is overwhelming most people.
So we should take a collective breath and learn to meditate and take care of ourselves and each other. Colleen, thank you so much. And breathing, yes, breathing is always important.
Breathing is huge.
I do forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
Don't hold your breath. Thank you so much for today. I've learned a lot. This is super interesting. You did a webinar with Coach Arya last week, and you'll be doing a couple more. So I will make sure that I link, if I can figure it out, on the screen right now for those of you watching on YouTube. And if I didn't, then it'll be for sure down here in the comments somewhere. I'm still learning the YouTube pointing. But thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sorry you can't go outside. I'm in Chicago. At least we're allowed to go for walks and things, but you know, fingers crossed that we'll continue to contain this thing and we can all get some exercise soon and get a bit of normalcy. Until then, breathing, learning to meditate, being good to yourself and to others.
You can skip indoors.
Skipping is a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great.
And I'll see you soon at the next webinar.
A privilege. Thank you.
Thank you.